The blistering Montana sun beat down on Sarah Blackburn's weary shoulders as she trudged along the dusty trail, her worn boots kicking up small clouds with each step. Her once fine dress, now faded and patched in several places, hung from her thin frame, telling a story of hardship that matched the lines of worry etched prematurely on her 22-year-old face. The year was 1879, and the West was still wild, unforgiving, and, for a woman alone, dangerously unpredictable. Sarah had been walking since dawn, having been unceremoniously dropped off at the last stagecoach stop, with nothing but a small carpet bag containing her meager possessions. The town of Silvercreek was supposedly just over the next ridge, though the distance seemed to stretch endlessly before her tired eyes. It was there she hoped to start anew, away from the whispers, the sidelong glances, and the memories that haunted her back in St. Louis. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah paused to take a sip from her nearly empty canteen. The water was warm and had a metallic taste, but it provided momentary relief from the parched feeling in her throat. She squinted at the horizon, trying to gauge how much farther she had to go, when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her turn. A tall man, astride a magnificent chestnut stallion, appeared on the trail behind her. He wore a worn leather vest over a simple shirt, dusty denim pants, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded a face weathered by sun and wind. A star-shaped badge pinned to his vest caught the sunlight. "Afternoon, madam," he called, slowing his horse as he approached. "You're a long way from anywhere, walking alone like this." Sarah stiffened, clutching her carpetbag tighter. "I'm headed to Silvercreek," she replied, her voice more confident than she felt. "That's a fair piece yet," the man said, looking her over with concern rather than suspicion. "I'm Sheriff Victor Rhodes. I'm heading back that way myself. Would you care for a ride? It's another 5 miles at least." Sarah hesitated. Her feet ached terribly, and the thought of walking 5 more miles in this heat made her knees weak. Still, she'd learned the hard way not to trust too easily. "I don't mean to frighten you," Sheriff Rhodes said, seeming to sense her apprehension. "But these parts can be dangerous for a lady alone, what with outlaws and such roaming about." After another moment's consideration, Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'd be grateful for the assistance." Victor dismounted with fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He was tall, taller than she'd first thought, with broad shoulders and strong hands that he offered to help her up. His eyes, she noticed, were a clear hazel, direct but kind. "May I ask your name, miss?" he inquired as he lifted her effortlessly onto his horse. "Sarah Blackburn," she replied, arranging her skirts as best she could while seated side saddle. "What brings you to Silvercreek, Miss Blackburn?" Victor asked as he mounted behind her, keeping a respectful distance while still ensuring she was secure. Sarah tensed at the question. "A fresh start," she answered simply, hoping he wouldn't press further. To her relief, he just nodded and clicked his tongue, urging the horse forward. "Silvercreek's a decent town. Growing fast since the Silver Strike last year. Plenty of opportunity for those willing to work hard." "That's what I'm counting on," Sarah murmured. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic sway of the horse lulling Sarah into a sense of calm she hadn't felt in months. Sheriff Rhodes seemed content to let the quiet stretch between them, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing brief stories about the surrounding area. As they crested the final ridge, Silvercreek came into view below them, a bustling frontier town nestled in a valley, with buildings of varying heights lining a main street that stretched from one end to the other. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the distant sounds of activity drifted up to them. "There she is," Victor said. "Not much compared to eastern cities, I reckon. But she's got heart." Sarah took in the sight with a mixture of trepidation and hope. "It looks lively," Victor chuckled. "That it is. Got everything a growing town needs: general store, hotel, saloon, blacksmith, even a small schoolhouse built last spring. The church is still under construction, but services are held regular in the meeting house." As they descended into the valley, Sarah noted the curious glances thrown their way. A woman arriving with the sheriff was bound to raise eyebrows in a small town. "Where were you planning to stay?" Victor asked as they approached the main street. Sarah's grip tightened on her bag. "I was hoping to find work at the hotel. I've experience as a maid, and with cooking." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "The Grand Hotel, though, there's nothing particularly grand about it, might be hiring. Mrs. Holloway runs a tight ship, but she's fair. I can introduce you if you'd like." "That's very kind, Sheriff, but I'd prefer to make my own way," Sarah replied, her pride still intact, despite everything she'd been through. They reached the hotel, a two-story wooden structure with a wide porch and freshly painted sign. Victor dismounted first, then carefully helped Sarah down, ensuring she was steady on her feet before releasing her arm. "As you wish, Miss Blackburn. But should you need anything during your stay in Silvercreek, my office is just down the street. Don't hesitate to call on me." Sarah managed a small smile. "Thank you, Sheriff Rhodes, for the ride and the advice." He tipped his hat to her, his expression warm. "Welcome to Silvercreek, Miss Blackburn. I hope you find what you're looking for here." With that, he mounted his horse again and continued down the street, leaving Sarah standing before the hotel, her future uncertain, but at least no longer quite so bleak. Taking a deep breath, Sarah straightened her shoulders and walked up the steps to the hotel's entrance. The lobby was modestly appointed but clean, with a polished wooden counter where a stern-faced older woman was writing in a ledger. "Excuse me," Sarah said. "I was told you might be in need of help. I'm experienced in housekeeping and cooking." The woman looked up, scrutinizing Sarah with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You got references?" Sarah's heart sank. "I'm afraid not, madam. I've come from St. Louis, looking for a fresh start." The woman's expression hardened slightly. What's your name, girl?" "Sarah Blackburn." "I'm Margaret Holloway. I own this establishment." She closed her ledger with a snap. "Why'd you leave St. Louis without securing references? That's not typical for someone with legitimate experience." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks. "My circumstances changed suddenly. I had to leave." Mrs. Holloway's eyes narrowed. "I see. Well, Miss Blackburn, I do have need of another maid, especially with the mining convention coming next month. But I run a respectable business. No funny business, no entertaining gentlemen in your room, no drinking. You break my rules, you're out without pay. Understood?" "Yes, madam," Sarah said quickly. "I assure you, I'm only looking for honest work." "Very well. Room and board will be deducted from your wages, which aren't much to begin with. You'll start tomorrow morning at 5. Martha will show you your duties." She rang a small bell on the counter, and a young woman appeared from a back room. "Martha, this is Sarah Blackburn. She's our new maid. Show her to the staff quarters and get her settled." Martha, a plump girl with rosy cheeks and a friendly smile, nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Holloway. Come with me, Miss Blackburn." As Sarah followed Martha through the hotel to a small room at the back of the building, she felt the first genuine glimmer of hope in months. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild her life away from the shame and scandal that had driven her from her home. The staff quarters were sparse, a narrow bed, a small dresser, a washstand with a cracked mirror above it, and a single window that looked out onto the alley behind the hotel. Still, it was clean and private, two luxuries Sarah had learned not to take for granted. "It ain't much," Martha said apologetically, "but it's warm in winter, and Mrs. Holloway keeps the roof in good repair, which is more than can be said for some places in town." "It's perfect," Sarah assured her, setting her carpetbag on the bed. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." Martha smiled. "Well, I'll let you get settled. Supper's at 6 in the kitchen. Mrs. Holloway doesn't like tardiness, so don't be late." She paused at the door. "And don't mind her gruff manner. She's fair, even if she doesn't seem it at first." After Martha left, Sarah sat heavily on the bed, the exhaustion of her journey finally catching up to her. She allowed herself a moment of weakness, a single tear tracking down her cheek, before she wiped it away resolutely. This was her chance to start again. And she wasn't going to waste it feeling sorry for herself. She unpacked her few possessions, carefully hanging her spare dress in the small wardrobe and placing her mother's tarnished silver hairbrush on the dresser. From the bottom of her bag, she withdrew a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Slowly she unwrapped it, revealing a tiny knitted bootie. She ran her finger over it gently before rewrapping it and tucking it beneath her pillow. Some things, she knew, couldn't be left behind, no matter how far you ran. The next several weeks passed in a blur of hard work and routine. Sarah rose before dawn each day, helped prepare breakfast for the hotel guests, then spent the morning cleaning rooms, changing linens, and scrubbing floors. The afternoons were devoted to laundry, a never-ending cycle of washing, wringing, and hanging sheets and towels to dry in the hot summer sun. It was exhausting work, but Sarah welcomed the physical fatigue that left her too tired to think, too tired to remember. Mrs. Halloway proved to be a demanding but fair employer, and Martha became something of a friend, her cheerful chatter filling the silence during their shared tasks. Gradually, Sarah began to settle into life in Silvercreek. She learned the rhythms of the small town, recognized the regular patrons of the hotel, and even exchanged pleasant greetings with shopkeepers and townspeople on her rare errands into town. She occasionally spotted Sheriff Rhodes on his rounds, and he always tipped his hat to her with a smile that somehow made her pulse quicken. But she kept her distance, knowing that getting close to anyone meant risking questions about her past, questions she wasn't prepared to answer. One evening in late August, as Sarah was finishing up her duties in the hotel dining room, the door swung open, bringing with it a blast of cool air and the sound of men's laughter. A group of cowboys, dusty from the trail, filed in, talking loudly among themselves. "Martha," Mrs. Halloway called from the kitchen. "Set up table 3 for these gentlemen. Sarah, help her serve." Sarah smoothed down her apron and grabbed a stack of plates, doing her best to keep her eyes down as she moved among the men, setting places. Most paid her little attention, too focused on their conversation and the prospect of a hot meal after days on the trail. "Well, if it ain't the prettiest sight I've seen in weeks," a slurred voice said, as Sarah placed a plate before one of the men. A hand grabbed her wrist, holding her in place. "Why don't you sit a spell with me, darlin'? I got plenty to share with a pretty thing like you." Sarah stiffened, trying to pull away without causing a scene. "Please let go, sir. I have work to do." The man's grip tightened. "Don't be like that, sweetheart. I'm just being friendly." "The lady asked you to let go." The deep voice cut through the chatter like a knife. Sheriff Rhodes stood in the doorway, his expression calm, but his eyes hard as flint as he stared at the cowboy holding Sarah's wrist. The man released her immediately, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "No harm meant, Sheriff. Just making conversation." "Make it elsewhere," Victor said evenly, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. "Silvercreek has rules about how ladies are treated. You'd do well to remember that." The cowboy muttered something under his breath, but turned his attention back to his companions, deliberately ignoring Sarah as she moved away. Victor caught her eye briefly, a silent question in his gaze. Sarah gave him a small nod to indicate she was all right, and he responded with a barely perceptible nod of his own, before turning to speak with Mrs. Halloway about a room for the night. Later, as Sarah was bringing fresh towels to the guest rooms, she found herself face to face with Victor in the upstairs hallway. "Miss Blackburn," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I hope you weren't too disturbed by that incident downstairs." "Not at all, Sheriff," she replied, clutching the towels to her chest like a shield. "I've encountered worse, but thank you for your intervention." He studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You seem to be settling in well here. Mrs. Halloway speaks highly of your work ethic." Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. "She does?" A smile tugged at the corner of Victor's mouth. "Well, in her way. Said you're not completely useless," which from her is high praise indeed. Despite herself, Sarah laughed, the sound surprising her. It had been so long since she'd laughed genuinely that the sensation felt almost foreign. "I've been meaning to ask," Victor continued, his tone casual but his eyes intent, "if you might allow me to escort you to the town social next Saturday. It's nothing formal, just a gathering with music, dancing, some food. Helps everyone get acquainted." Sarah's smile faded. "That's very kind, Sheriff, but I don't think—" "Victor," he interrupted gently. "When I'm not wearing the badge, I'm just Victor." "Victor," she amended, the name feeling intimate on her tongue. "I appreciate the invitation, but I prefer to keep to myself." "A social creature like yourself?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Somehow, I doubt that's your true preference, Miss Blackburn." "You don't know me," she said, more sharply than she'd intended. "No," he agreed, unperturbed. "But I'd like to, if you'd give me the chance." Sarah hesitated, torn between the longing for connection and the fear of exposure. "I should return to my duties," she said finally, sidestepping him in the narrow hallway. "The invitation stands," Victor called softly after her. "No pressure, no expectations, just a friendly evening." Sarah hurried away without responding, but his words echoed in her mind long after. No pressure, no expectations. If only life were that simple. The next day was Sunday, and even Mrs. Halloway observed the day of rest, giving her staff the morning off to attend church services if they wished. Sarah usually used the time to catch up on mending or to simply enjoy the rare solitude, but today she felt restless, confined by the small walls of her room. On impulse, she put on her better dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been quite fashionable, and pinned her hair up neatly. She didn't intend to go to the church service, but perhaps a walk would clear her head. The morning was pleasant, with a gentle breeze tempering the late summer heat. Sarah walked aimlessly through the town, nodding politely to the few people she passed, but not stopping to chat. Most of the town was at the Sunday service, leaving the streets quieter than usual. Her feet eventually carried her to the edge of town, where the newly constructed church stood. The service must have just ended, as people were filing out, gathering in small groups to talk. Sarah stayed back, watching from a distance, feeling simultaneously drawn to and alienated from the sense of community on display. "Decided to join us after all?" a now familiar voice asked from behind her. Sarah turned to find Victor standing there, looking different without his badge and gun belt. He wore a clean white shirt with a string tie, and his hair was slicked back neatly. "I was just walking," Sarah explained. "I didn't attend the service." "Ah," Victor nodded. "Well, you're welcome to walk with me if you'd like. I usually take a stroll along the creek on Sunday afternoons. It's peaceful." Sarah knew she should refuse, maintain the distance she'd carefully established, but the prospect of more solitude suddenly seemed unbearable. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. Victor's smile was warm as he offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah placed her hand lightly upon it, allowing him to guide her away from the church and down a path that led toward the creek that gave the town its name. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the sounds of the town fading behind them, replaced by the gentle gurgle of the creek and the rustling of leaves. Sarah found herself relaxing, the tension she carried constantly in her shoulders beginning to ease. "You know," Victor said eventually, "I came to Silvercreek 5 years ago. Not much different from you." Sarah glanced at him. "Oh?" He nodded. "Needed a fresh start. Left some things behind in Kansas I wasn't proud of." "What things?" Sarah asked before she could stop herself. Victor was quiet for a moment. "I was a deputy there, young, full of myself. There was a situation, a man accused of stealing horses. Evidence was circumstantial at best, but the town was riled up, wanted justice fast. My sheriff wanted to wait, gather more proof. I disagreed." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I let a mob take him from the jail. Told myself I couldn't have stopped them alone. That it wasn't my fault, but I could have, should have." He looked at her directly. "They hanged him. 2 days later, the real horse thief was caught red-handed in the next county." Sarah's hand tightened unconsciously on his arm. "That's terrible." "It was," Victor agreed grimly. "I turned in my badge that day, rode west. Drifted for almost a year before landing here. Town needed a sheriff, and I needed redemption. Been trying to earn it ever since." "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked softly. "Because," Victor said, stopping to face her fully. "We all have pasts, Sarah. Things we're not proud of. Mistakes we wish we could undo. But they don't define us, not unless we let them." Sarah looked away, her chest tight with emotion. "Some mistakes leave deeper marks than others." "True enough," Victor conceded. "But no mark is so deep it can't heal, given time and care." They had reached a bend in the creek where a large flat rock jutted out over the water. Victor led her to it, and they sat side by side, watching the water flow past, each lost in their own thoughts. "My husband died," Sarah said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could reconsider. "That's what I left behind in St. Louis." Victor turned to her, his expression compassionate but not pitying. "I'm sorry for your loss." Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "Don't be. Thomas Blackburn was not a good man, nor a good husband. Our marriage was difficult." "Did he hurt you?" Victor asked, his voice low and controlled, though Sarah could sense the anger beneath. Not in the way you're thinking, Sarah replied. Not physically. But there are other ways to wound. She took a deep breath. He was much older, from a prominent family. I was 17, naive, flattered by his attention. My parents were thrilled by the match. They saw it as my chance to secure a better life than they could provide. She stared at the water, finding it easier to speak without meeting Victor's gaze. At first, it seemed like a dream, a beautiful house, fine clothes, servants. But Thomas, he changed once we were married, became controlling, critical. Nothing I did was ever good enough, and he had certain expectations about having an heir. Victor remained silent, giving her space to continue at her own pace. I lost 3 babies before they were born, Sarah whispered. Each time, Thomas became more distant, more cruel. Said it was my fault, that I was defective somehow. After the 3rd time, he stopped coming to my bed entirely. Started keeping company with other women openly, humiliating me. She blinked back tears. Then I discovered I was with child again. I was terrified to tell him, afraid of how he'd react if I lost this one too. But the pregnancy progressed further than the others. I began to hope. Sarah's voice faltered, and she felt Victor's hand cover hers gently, offering support without pressure. I was 7 months along when Thomas took me to a dinner party at his business partner's home. He'd been drinking heavily, was in a foul mood. On the way home, our carriage hit a rut in the road. It wasn't a serious accident, but I fell forward, started having pains that night. She closed her eyes, the memory still raw. The baby, a boy, was born too early. He lived only a few hours. Thomas was furious, said I'd done it deliberately, that I'd never given him the heir he deserved. He left that night, went to one of his mistresses. 3 days later, he was found dead in her bed. Heart failure, the doctor said. Sarah, Victor began, but she shook her head. Let me finish, please. When he nodded, she continued. Thomas's family blamed me for his death, said I'd driven him to another woman's arms, that the stress of being married to such a failure had killed him. They made sure everyone knew what had happened, twisted the story to make me the villain. No one would receive me, employ me, so I took what little money I had left and came west, to start again where no one knew me as Thomas Blackburn's barren widow. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of her confession. Sarah waited for the judgment. The withdrawal, the change in how Victor saw her. It had happened every time in St. Louis the moment people learned her story. They either pitied her or condemned her. But either way, they never saw her the same again. Thank you, Victor said finally, for trusting me with your truth. Sarah looked at him in surprise. You're not disgusted, disappointed? Why would I be? Victor asked, genuinely puzzled. You survived a cruel marriage to a man who didn't deserve you. You endured loss that would break many people. And instead of giving up, you found the courage to start again. If anything, my respect for you has only deepened. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, and this time, she didn't try to hold them back. Victor pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her without comment, allowing her the dignity of her emotions without trying to fix or minimize them. When she had composed herself, Sarah returned the handkerchief with a watery smile. I've never told anyone the full story before. I'm honored you shared it with me, Victor said. He hesitated, then added, I hope this means you'll consider coming to the social on Saturday, as my friend, if nothing else. Sarah considered his request. The thought of facing the curious eyes of the townspeople still made her nervous, but the prospect didn't seem as daunting with Victor by her side. As your friend, she agreed cautiously. I'll come. The smile that lit Victor's face warmed something inside Sarah that had been cold for a very long time. The week leading up to the social passed quickly, with the hotel busier than usual as travelers arrived for the event. Sarah worked harder than ever, but there was a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before. Sharing her story with Victor had released something inside her, not erasing the pain, but making it somehow more bearable. Martha noticed the change, commenting on it as they folded sheets together on Friday afternoon. You're different lately, she observed. Happier, I think. Would a certain sheriff have anything to do with that? Sarah felt a blush creep into her cheeks. We're friends, that's all. Martha grinned. If you say so. but half the single women in town have set their caps for Victor Rhodes, and he's never given any of them more than polite attention. Yet he's been in this hotel nearly every day this week, always finding some reason to stop by. He has? Sarah asked, surprised. She'd seen him twice since their walk, once when he came to discuss security arrangements for the social with Mrs. Halloway, and once when he'd apparently needed to question a hotel guest about a minor dispute in town. Lord, yes, Martha laughed. Yesterday he claimed he needed to inspect the back staircase for safety concerns. The day before, he was very interested in our new lock system. The man's running out of excuses to come around. Sarah smiled despite herself. I'm sure you're mistaken. Sure as sunshine, I'm not, Martha insisted, and I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching. Before Sarah could respond, Mrs. Halloway's voice rang out from the front desk, calling for Martha. The younger woman gave Sarah a knowing wink before hurrying away, leaving Sarah to consider her words. Was it possible? Had Victor really been finding excuses to see her? And more unsettling, was Martha right about the way Sarah looked at him? She'd tried to keep her guard up, to maintain the friendship he had offered without allowing herself to feel more. But if she was honest with herself, Victor Rhodes had begun to occupy more and more of her thoughts. His quiet strength, his integrity, the way he treated everyone with respect, regardless of their station, these qualities had impressed her from the beginning. And then there was the way he looked at her, as if he truly saw her, not just the surface, but all that lay beneath. But Sarah knew better than to indulge such fanciful thoughts, even if Victor was interested in her as more than a friend, which seemed unlikely. Despite Martha's teasing, he deserved better than a woman with her history. A woman who had failed at the most basic duty of a wife. She pushed these thoughts aside and returned to her work, determined not to let foolish daydreams distract her from the life she was trying to build. Saturday evening arrived clear and mild, perfect weather for the town social. The event was to be held in the large meadow behind the schoolhouse, where tables had been set up for food, a platform constructed for the small band, and lanterns hung from poles to provide light once darkness fell. Sarah stood in front of the cracked mirror in her room, critically assessing her appearance. She'd done her best with her limited resources, washing her hair with the lavender-scented soap Martha had lent her, and arranging it in a style that she hoped looked fashionable but not too elaborate. Her blue dress had been freshly pressed, and she'd added a white lace collar, her one luxury item saved from her previous life, to give it a more festive appearance. A knock at her door startled her. "Miss Blackburn, Sheriff Rhodes is here for you," Martha called. "Coming," Sarah replied, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. She took one last look in the mirror, pinched her cheeks to bring some color to them, and opened the door. Martha gave her an approving once-over. "You look lovely," she whispered. "He won't know what hit him." Sarah shushed her, but couldn't help smiling as they made their way to the hotel lobby where Victor waited. He stood when he saw her, his expression making Sarah glad she'd taken extra care with her appearance. "Miss Blackburn," he said, his voice warm. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Sheriff," she replied, noting that he was dressed in his best as well. A dark suit, freshly polished boots, and a new-looking hat held respectfully in his hands. "You clean up quite nicely yourself." "Shall we?" he asked, offering his arm. Sarah nodded, placing her hand on his arm with more confidence than she'd shown the previous Sunday. As they left the hotel, she was acutely aware of Mrs. Halloway's appraising gaze and Martha's delighted grin, but found she didn't mind as much as she might have expected. The social was already in full swing when they arrived, with children running and playing, adults chatting in groups, and a few couples dancing to the lively tune the band was playing. Sarah felt a momentary surge of anxiety as heads turned toward them, but Victor's reassuring presence at her side helped her maintain her composure. "Would you like something to drink?" Victor asked. "Mrs. Peterson makes a mean lemonade, though if you want my advice, stay away from Mr. Wilson's punch. He tends to be heavy-handed with the whiskey." Sarah laughed. "Lemonade sounds perfect." As they moved through the crowd, Victor greeted people by name, occasionally stopping to introduce Sarah. To her surprise, everyone was welcoming, with several of the women inviting her to join their sewing circle or attend their reading group. "They seem very friendly," Sarah commented when they finally reached the refreshment table. "Silvercreek's a good community," Victor said, handing her a glass of lemonade. "Folks look out for each other here. Once they accept you as one of their own, you're family. And how does one become accepted? Sarah asked. Victor smiled. Being escorted by the sheriff helps, but honestly, just being yourself is enough. People recognize genuine goodness when they see it. Sarah wasn't sure she qualified as genuinely good, but the warmth in Victor's gaze made her want to believe it might be true. They found a relatively quiet spot near the edge of the gathering where they could observe the festivities while they talked. Victor pointed out various townspeople, sharing little anecdotes about each one that made Sarah laugh. His ability to see the humor and humanity in everyone was one of the things she'd come to admire most about him. As the sun began to set and the lanterns were lit, the band switched to a slower tune. Victor turned to her, a question in his eyes. "Would you care to dance, Miss Blackburn?" Sarah hesitated. She hadn't danced since before her marriage, and the thought made her nervous. "I'm afraid I might be rather out of practice." "That makes two of us," Victor admitted with a rueful smile, "but I promise not to step on your toes too often if you'll grant me the same courtesy." His self-deprecating humor eased her anxiety. "In that case, I'd be delighted, Sheriff." Victor led her to the area designated for dancing, placing one hand respectfully at her waist while taking her hand with the other. As they began to move to the music, Sarah was surprised by how naturally they fell into step together. Victor might have claimed to be out of practice, but he moved with a grace that belied his words, guiding her gently but confidently through the simple waltz. "You're quite good at this," Sarah observed, relaxing into the dance. "Don't sound so surprised," Victor teased. "I'll have you know, I was the most sought-after dance partner in my hometown, among the grandmothers and aunts at least." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the dance area and causing several heads to turn in surprise. The pretty hotel maid who kept to herself was laughing openly, looking happier than anyone had seen her. As the music continued, Victor drew her slightly closer, still maintaining proper distance, but creating a sense of intimacy between them. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Oh?" Sarah looked up at him, noting the serious cast that had come over his features. "I've been offered a position as sheriff in a larger town near Denver, better pay, more deputies." Sarah felt a sudden chill despite the warm evening. "I see. Congratulations." "When would you leave?" "I haven't accepted yet," Victor said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I wanted to talk to you first." "Me? Why would your decision depend on me?" Sarah asked, genuinely confused. The music ended before Victor could respond, and they were suddenly surrounded by other couples leaving the dance floor. He kept hold of her hand, leading her away from the crowd toward a large oak tree at the edge of the meadow. "Sarah," he said once they were relatively private, "surely you must know how I feel about you." Sarah's heart began to race. I've tried not to presume anything." "Then let me be clear," Victor said, taking both her hands in his. "These past weeks, getting to know you, have been the happiest of my life. Your strength, your kindness, despite everything you've been through. Your determination to build a new life, all of it has made me admire you more than any woman I've ever known." Sarah stood frozen, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "I care for you, Sarah," Victor continued, "deeply, more than I thought possible after such a short time. And I believe I hope that you might feel something for me, too." "Victor," Sarah began, then stopped, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. "I do care for you, but there are things you don't understand." "Then help me understand," he urged gently. Sarah pulled her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself. "You deserve better than me. A woman without my history. Someone who can give you children, a proper family." "Is that what this is about?" Victor asked, realization dawning in his eyes. "Sarah, do you think I care about that?" "You should," she insisted, tears threatening. "Any man would. No man wants a used bride, Victor, especially one who's proven she can't fulfill a wife's most basic duty." Victor's expression softened with understanding and something deeper, more profound. "Then I'm no man," he said firmly. "I'm yours, if you'll have me." Sarah stared at him, disbelieving. "What?" "I said, I'm yours," Victor repeated, stepping closer to her. "Sarah, I don't want you because of what you can give me or what you can do for me. I want you because of who you are. Your past, your struggles, they're part of what made you the woman standing before me now, and I wouldn't change a single thing about you. But children, Sarah began. If we're blessed with them someday, I'll be grateful, Victor said. If not, having you as my wife would be more than enough happiness for a lifetime. And there are children who need homes, love. We could give them that if you wanted. Sarah's tears spilled over. You can't mean that. Victor reached out, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. I've never meant anything more in my life. I love you, Sarah Blackburn, not despite your past, but including it, all of it. The word love hung in the air between them, powerful and transformative. Sarah had never expected to hear it again, had convinced herself she didn't need it. But now, faced with the honest emotion in Victor's eyes, she felt the walls around her heart crumbling. I love you too, she whispered, the admission both frightening and freeing. Victor's smile was radiant as he drew her into his arms. Then marry me, be my wife, my partner, my best friend. Let me show you every day for the rest of our lives that you are wanted, valued, loved, exactly as you are. Sarah looked up at him, seeing nothing but sincerity and love in his expression. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, to believe that happiness might be possible for her after all. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I'll marry you. Victor's arms tightened around her, and when he lowered his head to kiss her, Sarah met him halfway, her heart opening fully to the promise of their shared future. The town of Silvercreek buzzed with excitement in the weeks following the social. The news that Sheriff Rhodes had proposed to the quiet hotel maid, and that she had accepted spread like wildfire, becoming the main topic of conversation in every home and business. To Sarah's surprise, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Mrs. Halloway, though outwardly grumbling about losing a good worker, quietly gifted her with a set of fine linen napkins for her new home. Martha squealed with delight and immediately volunteered to help with wedding preparations. Even the townspeople Sarah barely knew stopped her on the street to offer congratulations and warm wishes. Victor had declined the position in Denver without regret, telling Sarah that Silvercreek was where they belonged, at least for now. Together they began planning their future, starting with a small house on the edge of town that Victor had been saving to purchase. It's nothing fancy, he warned as he led her to see it for the first time. 2 rooms downstairs, 2 up. Needs some work, but the foundation's solid. Sarah fell in love with it immediately, the morning sunlight streaming through the east-facing windows, the sturdy oak tree in the yard, the view of the mountains in the distance. It wasn't the grand home she'd lived in with Thomas, but it was far more appealing because it would be filled with love rather than criticism and coldness. They were married on a bright October morning, with the aspens turning gold against the mountains. The ceremony was held in the newly completed church, which was filled to capacity with well-wishers. Sarah wore a new dress of cream-colored silk, a gift from the town seamstress who had insisted on making it as her wedding present, with her mother's locket around her neck and wildflowers in her hair. As she walked down the aisle toward Victor, Sarah felt none of the anxiety that had plagued her first wedding. Instead, a profound sense of peace and rightness settled over her. This was where she belonged, with this man who saw her completely and loved her anyway. Victor's eyes never left her as she approached, his expression a mixture of awe, joy, and love so intense it took her breath away. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, squeezing them gently as if to reassure himself she was really there. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with the newly arrived minister speaking eloquently about partnership, respect, and enduring love. When the time came to exchange vows, Victor's clear, steady voice carried throughout the church, as he promised to cherish and honor Sarah for all his days. When it was her turn, Sarah's voice trembled slightly at first, but grew stronger with each word. I, Sarah, take you, Victor, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward. I promise to stand by your side in joy and in sorrow, to respect and honor you, to laugh with you and cry with you, to support your dreams as you have supported mine. With this ring, I give you my heart, freely and without reservation, from this day until the end of our days. There wasn't a dry eye in the church as Victor slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, then bent to seal their vows with a tender kiss. The celebration afterward was held in the meadow, where they had danced at the social, now decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons. Tables groaned under the weight of food, contributed by nearly every woman in town. And Mr. Wilson's famous punch flowed freely, though a non-spirited version was available for the children and those who preferred it. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found a moment of quiet, watching from a slight distance as Victor laughed with a group of his friends. The sight of him, her husband, filled her with a happiness she had once thought impossible. "He's a good man," a voice said beside her. Sarah turned to find an older woman she recognized as Mrs. Bennet, the widow who ran the general store. "The best," Sarah agreed with a smile. Mrs. Bennet studied her thoughtfully. "You know, when my Albert passed 5 years ago, I thought that was the end of happiness for me. Couldn't imagine feeling joy again, much less love." She patted Sarah's hand. "I was wrong. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." "It certainly does," Sarah said, thinking of how much her life had changed in just a few short months. "You two are going to be just fine," Mrs. Bennet said confidently. "Anyone with eyes can see how much that man adores you, and how much you adore him right back." Before Sarah could respond, Victor appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "May I steal my wife for a dance, Mrs. Bennet?" The older woman smiled. "You certainly may, Sheriff. Just remember to bring her back occasionally. We ladies intend to officially welcome her to our sewing circle next week." As Victor led Sarah to the dance area, she leaned into him, savoring the solid warmth of his presence. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" she asked. "You have," he replied, pulling her close as the music began. "But I'll never tire of hearing it." "Good," Sarah said, "because I intend to tell you every day for the rest of our lives." The next year passed in a blur of domestic happiness that Sarah had never thought possible. She and Victor settled into their home and into life as a married couple with surprising ease, as if they had been meant to find each other all along. Sarah took to keeping house with enthusiasm, turning their simple dwelling into a warm, inviting home. She planted a vegetable garden behind the house, learned to make preserves from Mrs. Bennet, and even acquired a small flock of chickens that provided fresh eggs and endless amusement with their antics. Victor continued his duties as sheriff with the same dedication and integrity that had first drawn Sarah to him. But now he came home each evening to share stories of his day, to eat the meals Sarah prepared with appreciation, and to sit with her on their small porch, watching the sunset and planning their future. They became a respected couple in the community, with Victor's position as sheriff and Sarah's growing involvement in town activities making them central figures in Silvercreek. Sarah found herself hosting the ladies' sewing circle once a month, teaching reading to children in the schoolhouse when the regular teacher was ill, and helping organize various community events. It was a fulfilling life, rich with friendship and purpose. The only shadow that occasionally fell over their happiness was Sarah's fear that she might never be able to give Victor children. Though he never mentioned it, never gave her any reason to believe it mattered to him, Sarah couldn't help worrying that someday he might regret choosing her. These fears came to a head one evening in late summer, just over a year after their wedding. Sarah had been feeling unwell for several days, tired, nauseous, dizzy at times. She'd kept it from Victor, not wanting to worry him, but on this particular evening, she fainted while preparing dinner. Victor found her on the kitchen floor when he returned home, pale and disoriented. His calm exterior barely masked his panic as he carried her to their bed and rode for the doctor, returning in record time with the elderly physician in tow. Dr. Thompson examined Sarah thoroughly, while Victor paced anxiously outside their bedroom door. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was unreadable. "Well," Victor demanded, "what's wrong with my wife?" Dr. Thompson glanced back at the bedroom door, which was still ajar. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," Sarah called from inside. "Please, Victor should hear whatever it is. We have no secrets." The doctor nodded and gestured for Victor to follow him back into the bedroom. Sarah was sitting up against the pillows now, her face still pale but her expression composed, as if she was preparing herself for bad news. "Mrs. Rhodes," the doctor began, his tone gentler than his usual gruff manner, "I believe congratulations are in order." Sarah blinked, confusion replacing the anxiety on her face. "I don't understand." "You're going to have a baby," Dr. Thompson said plainly. About 3 months along, by my estimation. The room fell silent. Victor stood frozen beside the bed, staring at the doctor as if he hadn't quite understood the words. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her abdomen, her expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning joy. "A baby?" she whispered. "But I thought, after what happened before." Dr. Thompson shrugged. "Sometimes these things are mysterious. I've seen women who thought they couldn't conceive suddenly become mothers after years of trying. The body can heal in ways we don't fully understand. Will she be all right?" Victor finally found his voice, moving to sit beside Sarah on the bed, taking her hand in his. "She's healthy, and the baby seems to be developing normally," the doctor assured him. "But given her history, we'll want to be cautious. No heavy lifting, plenty of rest, especially as the pregnancy progresses." He packed up his bag and headed for the door. "I'll check on you regularly, Mrs. Rhodes. Send for me immediately if you have any concerns." When the doctor had gone, Sarah and Victor sat in stunned silence, still trying to process the unexpected news. Finally, Sarah turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. "Victor, are you happy about this?" In answer, Victor gathered her gently into his arms, pressing his face into her hair. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, it's a miracle." Sarah pulled back to look at him, her own joy mixed with lingering fear. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong again?" Victor cradled her face in his hands. "Then we'll face it together, like we've faced everything else." "But Sarah, this feels different, doesn't it? We're different. This is our child, created in love, not obligation." Sarah nodded slowly, allowing herself to believe in the possibility of this new happiness. "Our child," she repeated, the words filling her with wonder. Victor placed his hand over hers on her still flat abdomen. "Our future," he said softly. The next months were a mixture of anticipation, preparation, and careful attention to Sarah's health. Victor became almost comically protective, trying to do everything for her despite her protests that she wasn't an invalid. The women of the town rallied around her, sharing advice, hand-me-down baby items, and endless encouragement. As her body changed, growing round with the new life within, Sarah alternated between joy and terror. Each milestone, the first fluttering movements, the strong kicks that came later, the visible shifting beneath her skin as the baby moved, brought both relief and renewed anxiety about what might still go wrong. But Victor was her rock, steady and unwavering in his support. Each night he talked to their unborn child, telling stories, making promises, his deep voice soothing both the baby and Sarah into peaceful sleep. Winter came early that year, with heavy snows blanketing Silvercreek by mid-November. Sarah's time was growing near, and both she and Victor were increasingly aware of the potential complications that the weather might present when the baby decided to arrive. On a particularly cold night in early December, with the wind howling around the eaves of their snug house, Sarah woke to a sharp pain and a rush of wetness. "Victor," she gasped, shaking her sleeping husband. "It's time!" Victor was instantly alert, pulling on his clothes and boots with remarkable speed for a man just roused from deep sleep. "I'll get the doctor," he promised, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. "Hurry!" Sarah urged as another pain gripped her. The hours that followed were a blur of pain, fear, and determined effort. The doctor arrived quickly despite the snow, bringing Martha with him to help. Victor refused to leave Sarah's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement through each contraction. As dawn broke, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Sarah gave a final, powerful push, and their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the room. "A girl," Dr. Thompson announced, cleaning the tiny red-faced infant before placing her on Sarah's chest. "A healthy, perfect girl." Sarah stared down at their daughter in awe, counting fingers and toes, marveling at the tiny features that somehow combined her own and Victor's. "She's beautiful," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Victor's expression as he looked at his wife and child was one of such profound love and gratitude that it nearly broke Sarah's heart. "Just like her mother," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Later, when the doctor and Martha had gone, and the new family was alone together for the first time, Victor sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Sarah as she nursed their daughter. "What shall we name her?" he asked, gently stroking the baby's downy head. Sarah had been thinking about this for months, considering and discarding various options. But now, looking at their daughter's face, she knew. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope." Victor's smile was radiant. "Hope," he repeated. "It's perfect." As the winter snow continued to fall outside, cocooning their small house in a blanket of white silence, the three of them huddled together in the warm glow of the bedside lamp, a family created not from obligation or societal expectations, but from love, acceptance, and the courage to believe in second chances. Spring came early the following year, as if nature itself was celebrating the new life in the Rhodes household. Hope grew quickly, a happy, healthy baby, with her father's hazel eyes and her mother's smile. She became the center of their world, bringing joy not just to Sarah and Victor, but to the entire community of Silvercreek, where she was doted on by honorary aunts and uncles at every turn. On a warm day in late May, just after Hope's 6th month, Sarah sat with her on a blanket beneath the oak tree in their yard. Victor had taken the day off from his duties, something he did regularly now, unwilling to miss too many of his daughter's milestones, and was nearby, mending a section of fence while keeping a watchful eye on his two favorite people. Sarah watched as Hope batted at a colorful toy, laughing with delight at her daughter's determination. The sound drew Victor's attention, and he set down his tools to join them on the blanket. "She's going to be stubborn, like her mother," he observed, tickling Hope's chin and being rewarded with a toothless grin. "And brave, like her father," Sarah added, leaning against his shoulder. Victor put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Are you happy, Mrs. Rhodes?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Sarah looked at their daughter, then up at the man who had taught her to believe in love again, who had seen past her scars to the woman beneath, who had given her not just a second chance at happiness, but a family she had thought forever beyond her reach. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. Victor kissed her then, soft and sweet, full of promise for all the years stretching ahead of them. Hope made a gurgling sound between them, unwilling to be left out, and they both laughed, including her in their embrace. As the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves of the old oak tree, casting dappled shadows on the three figures below, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the frightened, wounded woman who had arrived in Silvercreek, believing herself unworthy of love, to this moment of perfect contentment, surrounded by the family she had created. She remembered her words to Victor that night at the social, spoken from a place of pain and self-doubt. "No man wants a used bride." And his response simple, powerful, transformative. "Then I'm no man. I'm yours." In the end, it wasn't about being wanted or not wanted, used or unused. It was about being loved wholly, completely, without reservation or condition. It was about finding someone who saw all of you, the light and the shadow, the strength and the weakness, and chose you anyway, every day. As Hope drifted off to sleep between them, her tiny hand curled trustingly around Sarah's finger, Sarah sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had guided her steps to Silvercreek, to Victor, to this life that once seemed impossible. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She was Sarah Rhodes' now beloved wife, mother, friend, valued member of her community. And as Victor smiled at her over their sleeping daughter's head, his eyes full of the same love that had healed her broken heart, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "I love you," she whispered. "And I love you," Victor replied, the words as fresh and true as the first time he'd spoken them. Always. In the distance, the church bell rang out across Silvercreek, marking the hour. But for the family beneath the oak tree, time seemed to stand still, holding them in a perfect moment of happiness, hard-won and deeply cherished, a moment that held the promise of all the moments yet to come.